All right, let me share my screen and we can start.
Hey, Praneeth.
Hey, Prashant, welcome. We're just getting started.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start with our invocation chant. Asato ma satgamaya. Asato ma satgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma amritam gamaya. Mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Okay, so the translation, we want to invoke the divine so that we may go from truth, from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, and from death to immortality. Cool. So last week we kind of ended our class where we were getting into the cause of why the ego gets identified. So we were on verse 8. I think we just read it, and let's reread the English again. So the identification of the ego with the reflection of consciousness, the body, and the witness are of three kinds, namely natural due to past karma and due to ignorance, respectively. Okay, so we have sort of gone through like what happens with the ego and sort of the mechanism of the ego. So the ego is essentially like a flame of a candle, which is, it keeps appearing. And it is not a real entity. It's essentially something that comes up due to identification. And what do we identify with? Everything that is perceived. So we can identify with the physical objects in the world, the places, things, conditions, my house, my friends, my relationships, my job, all of those things are like a reflection of consciousness. So that's from the physical aspect. We can, go a little subtler. You can say, I get identified with the body itself. I have a healthy body, I have an unhealthy body, I have a fit body, I have an unfit body. These are all sort of physical attributes that we get identified with. And we think we are the body. And in some scriptures, we will say the root cause of bondage would be the identification with the body. So these are sort of going through like the most strongest causes that keep us identified. And then lastly is the subtlest, which is the identification with the witness itself, which is basically the idea that I am the self. And so when we go into like what are the causes of why this could happen, one is natural, which essentially is kind of explaining that we haven't used the word here, but essentially the word we use is Maya. So Maya is essentially the power and the cause of which this bondage comes about. And it's natural in the sense that it is there. The scriptures or like nobody ever talks about why it exists, but the fact is it does exist. And we can experience that, right? Like it's so easy to get identified with whatever is seen. And nobody knows why it comes about, but the fact is that it is there. So that's the natural aspect that exists. And then the second is like due to past karma. So in yoga, we essentially say desire is the cause of reincarnation. So, when I want something really badly and I sort of go after it from a standpoint of like, this desire will give me happiness, I lose my awareness that I am actually consciousness. And I think I'm a person, and I sort of, the whole cycle of like wanting something and putting energy into it and trying to get it starts. And if you look at your own life today, if I look at my life today, what are the things that I'm doing? And the reason why I'm doing those things is because of the past. So, why are you living where you're living? Because past actions led you to this moment. What are the things that you like doing? What are your hobbies? All because of the things that you've done in the past. So there are certain desires that are yet to be fulfilled and that exist as seeds in our subconscious or unconscious, you can say. And when the time is right, they kind of manifest as a desire. And depending on how strong the desire is, we will make the effort to fulfill the desire. Sometimes the desire is too strong and we have to go through it. And sometimes the desire could be, a little manageable and you can put it on the side and say, okay, I'm not going to pursue it. So that just depends on the past. And these strong desires, and the word we use for these desires is vasanas. So these strong vasanas have been seeded in us over lifetimes, you can say. And sometimes we just can't help ourselves. We just have to go through with it. And when we get identified with these strong desires, we lose our awareness of the self and we get attached to the ego, because the ego says happiness is over there. So if you want the new Tesla, thinking that the Tesla is going to give you happiness, you will do whatever it takes to get the Tesla because you think happiness is in the Tesla. So that's like, these past karmas that are that cause us to lose our identification with the self, and we get identified with the ego. And then the last one is ignorance. This is sort of the root, you can say the root cause of being bound also, which is I don't know who I am. I think I'm the body. I think I'm the mind. I think I am my personality. And this is ignorance. And what we're studying Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga is knowledge of the self.
There's one right over there. Okay, thank you. There's your much latte.
Basically, can you mute? Thanks. So
I turned on your 10 a.m. alarm.
Oops. All right. So I guess we were talking about that ignorance. So the last one is ignorance, which is sort of the fallback, which is the root cause of bondage. I don't know who I am. And the only cure to that is knowledge of the self. And once we have that knowledge of the self, all the other causes of bondage disappear. Because we have a direct experience of who I am, and all of the other bondages are essentially dependent on the fact that I believe I'm a person. I believe I'm my body. I believe I'm a personality. And once that is removed, once we have a direct experience of my real self, you can say, then all of these other causes automatically dissolve and go away. And we will get into that a little bit more of like how to directly experience the self. But essentially here we are going through the reasons as to like why our ego is continuing to persist and continuing to exist for us in our experience. Any thoughts about this?
Hey, Puneet, early on you said that ego was like a candle flame, but it wasn't real. Could you just come back to that and maybe elaborate a little more?
Sure. So if we look at our ego, we have an experience that I'm a person when I have a thought, right? So for example, somebody looks at you, Steve, and says, oh, Steve, wow, you're such a smart person. You know, the things that you said were amazing. I was so impressed by your presentation the other day. In those moments, something is, words have been heard by you. And in those moments, your ego gets very happy, right? Like there's like, wow, this person is complimenting me. I am so special. So now you have a thought about yourself, which appears as, I am so special. Wow, I love this. I like what this person is saying. There is this sort of thickening of your ego, you can say. And conversely, if someone comes up to you and says, Steve, that project that you did was horrible. Like, you sucked. Like, you let everybody down. That was, terrible. And in those moments, also the same thing happens, which is your ego thickens. Do you see that? Like, there's this sort of rising and falling of something. You can say there's a thickening of this ego sense, and we get sort of, our attention goes towards this idea of who I am. I'm either a person who is good, or a piece of person who is bad, smart, not smart. So this kind of rises and falls. And then when I ask you, where does the ego go when you fall asleep? It's gone, right? When you are in deep sleep, you have no perception of the ego. It is only when you wake up, and you are maybe doing a very particular kind of activity, does ego come in and thicken. So what that means is that ego is not a thing that is concrete. In moments when you're really deeply focused in an activity, let's say you're jogging, or let's say you're driving your car, or let's say you're watching, a very engaging piece of music, ego is also gone. You're not thinking about the little me or the little I saying, what do I like? What do I want? That's what I mean by the fact that it's a flame, that it keeps appearing and disappearing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks much.
And the cool thing is that the fact that it comes and goes means that you don't have to take it that seriously. And that's the sort of process that we're trying to get at, which is, it's not like the ego is going to disappear. Like, you cannot function without an ego. You will still have preferences. You will still have likes and dislikes, even after realization. But the perspective and the place of ego is going to be in the right place, which is, it is a function of the mind that helps me make sense of the world. I will still prefer tea over coffee. Like, you will still have those preferences, right? Like, those are not going to go away. But if tea is not available and I have to drink coffee, will I suffer? Maybe not so much, right? Like, the place of ego is going to be in the right place. That's what the work is going to do. Okay. Any other thoughts about this? Okay, let's go to the next verse. Sambandhino sanortasti nivritti sahajasya tu karmakshyat prabodhacha nirvittete kramadhubhe. So the mutual identification of the ego and the reflection of consciousness, which is natural, does not cease as long as they are taken to be real. The other two identifications disappear after the wearing out of the result of karma and the attainment of knowledge of the highest reality, respectively. Cool. So, the mutual identification of the ego and the reflection of consciousness is that, the ego essentially thinks it is conscious, which is in fact a false understanding, right? Like, the ego is not aware. I am aware of the ego. And that is the sort of false understanding that is the cause of bondage. And what we call this anyonya abhyas, which is mutual superimposition. So I attribute to the self or to consciousness joy-giving properties, or like, properties of being aware, properties of being alive. These are all properties of the self. And in my delusion or in my ignorance, I give what I'm seeing, which is the ego, those properties. And similarly, the reverse, which is I give the self properties of the ego. So this is sort of the mutual identification which causes us confusion. And this is natural in the sense that we are sort of born, right? Like, I guess the question is that if everything is one, right? If everything is Brahman, you can say. We haven't come across that word yet. But if everything is one, why is it that I experience everything as two? Why do I feel separate from this world? Why do I feel like a person? Why does the world feel separate? That is our experience. So that's essentially sort of the natural word here, which is that that's our natural, normal existence. And unless we investigate, it does not end. Unless we actually sit back and see, who am I? Like, what is this world? How does it come about? If we ask those questions, we're never going to really find out, because we are just going to be lost in what we see. And that's what most people do. We're just like so involved in the world and getting things and like rising up the ranks and accumulating things. No problem. There's nothing wrong in doing that. We are born, we do that, we die, and that's totally fine. But there are some people who like to question, who am I? And when that happens, we start to realize what is already there. It's not something that this is new knowledge that you're gaining. It's just that you are undoing knowledge which you thought was true. So it's kind of a removal of the veil rather than some new accumulation that makes you see better. It's clearing up the fog that exists in our mind. So that's the first sort of like, the natural reason. Unless we see that the world is not what we think it is, this does not end. That's the first sort of step that we have to take. The other two, which is, the karma, as I mentioned, like there's some desires that we have that we just cannot let go. We have to get that house. We have to get married. We have to do those things because it's just they're just so strong. We have to, it's kind of like being addicted to something, right? Like if you're addicted to something, you have to do it. And you keep doing it until you hit rock bottom. And only when you hit rock bottom do you realize that, okay, this is not working out and I have to get out of it. In the same way, you have to hit rock bottom. If you're after money, and if that's a very strong desire, you can work 90-hour weeks and get as much money as you want. And you have to do it because there's no other way. And once maybe you get to a point where you have enough money, that's when you may realize that, okay, this is great, but I have got what I wanted, which was a lot of money, but I still am not feeling any better. So that's the wearing out of the karma, which is, okay, money doesn't do it. Now what? Maybe now it's Pilates, right? So we jump from one place to another until we find out that what we are looking for is not outside, it is within. When that shift happens, that's when the true path to spirituality begins. So the wearing out of karma, and then finally the attainment of knowledge. So that is the last sort of step that happens. Everything else are preparatory that lead us to this last place, which is knowledge. Our cause of bondage is lack of knowledge. The only thing that can remove that is knowledge. So if I ask you, what did I eat for lunch yesterday? You wouldn't know, because it's, how many push-ups would you have to do to give me the answer? How many like pilgrimages would you have to go to? How many meditation courses you have to go to? You wouldn't know, because that's not the cause of ignorance is the fact that you don't know. And the antidote to that is like knowledge. So you need to know. So if I were to tell you, okay, I ate, omelette and avocado for lunch, you'll be like, okay, that's what you ate. And now your ignorance is gone. Now you know. Similarly, my cause is that I do not know myself. I think I am something other than what I really am. I think I'm my mind. I think I'm my body. And the cause of that is like having a direct experience of who I am. And how do I do that? We have to still the mind. So only by stilling the mind, our attention on the external world starts to lessen. And once it starts to lessen, the reality that is will directly shine. So we can try an experiment. So, if we try to, still our eyes, our eyes is always moving around, if you notice, especially when you're thinking. These are, direct experiments that you can try. So like if you've noticed, like when you're thinking, your eyes are always sort of either moving, and when they're moving, it essentially is like lost in thought. But if you can try an experiment and just like look at maybe a particular point in your room right now, just stare at it. You will start to see that your mind is sort of quietening a bit. Maybe you can pay attention to your breathing while you're staring at whatever you're looking at. So once we start to still the mind, the glory of the self automatically starts to reveal itself, because the self is self-revealing. Like we don't have to do anything else to taste the glory of it. So because why? Because you are you. It's not like there's something outside of you that you're going to realize. Everything has to be realized from within. And from within is, where our experience comes from. So like another thing that I, like to point out is that all of life experience is happening within. If we can see that, then that's very freeing, because that gives us a lot of, I would say, like ability to like change our experience. We don't have to like react to things that are happening outside, because all of the actual reactions are actually happening within. Okay, so we will go through the process of how to realize the self in the next few verses. Any thoughts about this? Okay, next verse. Verse 10. Ahankara layesh suptao bhaved deho pyachetanaha ahankara vikasardha swapna sarvastu jagaraha. So in the state of deep sleep, when the thought of ego disappears, the body also becomes unconscious. The state in which there is a half manifestation of the ego is called the dream state. And the state in which there is a full manifestation of the ego is called the state of waking. Okay, so here we're kind of going into this very sort of 3 stages of our experience in a day, which is, when we are in deep sleep, we have no experience of the world. It's a complete blank, right? So, where, we can say we are not even aware of what our memories are, what our unconscious is. Everything is kind of gone into like a seed state. And in this state, you can say the ego does not exist for this amount of time while your mind is in deep sleep. When the mind sort of wakes out of deep sleep and goes into this dream state, you have a experience of the world, right? You have an experience of a dream world, which is, I have a dream body. I may have like dream people in there. I have conversations, maybe I have experiences. I may even have an ego in the dream where I'm liking something that I'm seeing. I'm not liking something. Maybe it's a nightmare, so I'm getting scared of what's going on. Maybe it's like a beautiful memory, so I'm feeling very happy. All of these are experiences in the dream, right? So that's like, you can say it's a half manifestation. And why is it half? Because the entire world in the dream is essentially the mind. There is no other substance that is created or needed to experience that. It's all mind stuff that has been used for us to create this whole vivid experience of the dream. And then when we wake up, we see this world, right? And in this world, we have memories, we have all these sort of like desires and all of the impressions of the past that make us experience this world in the way that we do. So my experiences are different than your experiences are different than somebody else's experience. And why? Because of the deep impressions that you have, the desires that you have. I may be, going after the world because I love mangoes. You may be going after the world because you love, I don't know, strawberries, right? So like all these different viewpoints and different opinions cause you to perceive the world in a different way. So we are all wearing different glasses, you can say. The same person, or rather the same experience being observed by different people will have different interpretations, right? And that's true even with the scriptures. So everybody has a different interpretation of this world. And this is essentially the three sort of like, again, a list of, it's a very famous like waking, dream, and deep sleep. These are the three experiences that we have. Because if you look at our experiences, those are the three things that we experience. There's nothing outside of it. You can say, like some of the other scriptures talk about half dream, half waking state, greatly waking state, but they're all sort of similarly, getting a little nuanced there. When you can daydream, for example, like right now, if I'm looking at, maybe some of you have already started thinking about something else, like what you're going to do after class. So that's like daydream, right? You're not really present to this, but you're present to your internal story that's going on. So there's those like other classifications. We're not going to go into that. But the idea is that there are these different states, and the ego is present in some, it's more active in some places, it's less active in some other places. So, you can also say when you're in deep focus in the waking state, the ego goes down. You're not thinking about like, how am I doing? What are people thinking of me when you're running a marathon, for example, right? You're just so focused and you're so tired. You're just like running. That's the only activity on your mind. There's no, thought of like, what did my boss think of me? Why did I say this? Maybe you do in the beginning, but once you're very tired, your mind kind of gives up on those thoughts. So that's kind of the takeaway from this verse, is that ego is something that rises and falls. It's not a constant. It can come up and it can go down. So if there's something that you're really identified with, let's say, you're giving a presentation at work and you're very concerned about what people think of you. In those moments, your ego is going to be very active. You're going to maybe need to poop because your stomach is grumbling. Maybe all these at least that happens to me when I get like, you get very conscious and I have a very sort of important presentation. My stomach starts to grumble and I need to go to the loo. Different people experience it differently, but the idea is that these are experiences which come and go. It's not a constant. There is a possibility to go beyond all of that, but it's not necessary. It's enough to see that this is what is going on, to go beyond, to transcend. Okay, any thoughts about this verse? And the word we use for ego is ahankara, by the way. So it's essentially, when we talk about ego, in English, the translation of that would be I am fill in the blank. So I am intelligent, I am fearful, I am stupid, I am happy. These are all states of the ego. So the word that comes after am. And this is essentially being identified with what is being perceived. So if I'm perceiving happiness, the ego thinks I am happy, which is why we get the experience, I am happy. Similarly, if there's a situation where, there's fear, the ego says, I am fearful, rather than saying fear is being perceived. It's so fast that, the experience happens so quickly that our understanding and our sort of reaction to it, we think we are what we are seeing. For example, if I look at a beautiful car on the street, I'm very clear about the fact that I am not the car. And I would never say I am the car or I am the beautiful car. Why? Because my understanding is clear that I am something which is separate from the car. I am not the car. But if something happens in the mental world where fear is coming up, we don't have the same experience as the car. We'd never say, oh, I am not the fear because I'm the one looking at the fear. We say I'm fearful. And this is sort of this habitual tendency or the deep sort of repeated experiences that we have had in the past that have led us to quickly identify with what is being perceived. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to see that everything that is being perceived is not me. It is definitely an experience, but it is not who I am. So just like when you have a dream and you have all of those experiences, you wake up and you're like, you may be like, that was a pretty crazy dream, but you never think and get identified with what happened in the dream. You may remember it for a minute and then you forget about it and you move on with like your day. So it doesn't bother you as much. Similarly, the ego, definitely experienced, but not real. And not real with a capital R, which is it is not who you are. It is real with a small r, which has a relative reality. Okay, any thoughts about this one?
Hey, Puneet. So, I mean, in life, like we feel a sense of comfort when we say have financial independence, or when we know that, for someone like us, like who's immigrated to US or other places, once we know that our status in that country is not temporary, we feel a sense of comfort, right? And with ego, when we feel afraid or there's fear and so on, then this knowledge kind of helps at that moment kind of differentiate that, okay, I'm not afraid, it's the ego, or you kind of help differentiate and feel a sense of comfort temporarily. Is there like is there anything that we should be doing, or any specific mental model that will help us feel that feel a sense of comfort over the long term versus just at the moment?
So I guess your question is how to get out of fear completely.
Kind of, yeah. Yes.
Okay, great question. So one thing to realize is that everything that's happening in the now is because of the past. Why are you feeling fearful about your visa or like your financial independence? Is because in the past you've considered those things important, right? Like if you don't have them, you would either something would happen to you, either to your body or your personal life, whatever, right? You cannot change the past. You cannot change what you've experienced, and those experiences have had a certain quality to it, right? So when you were, let's say the first time you heard about the visa, you never really thought about it at all. You're like, okay, whatever, right? It's a visa. But over time, the thought of visa, the thought of like immigration, the thought of thing has built this like deep, complicated idea of what the visa is and the implications of it, right?
Correct.
And you cannot do anything about that because it has been created. It is a complex, lots of different moving parts there. But what you can do now is that when you experience fear and those kinds of emotions, you experience it fully and totally and not add to it. So you're experiencing that complex emotion totally, and you're not adding anything more to it. You're like, all right, I'm experiencing fear, and this fear has happening to me because of the past. It's because of the ideas that I have created. And when you experience the fear fully, something interesting happens. It starts to change. And you're not trying to change it, you're just experiencing it. But because the way consciousness is, where everything in this world is sort of moving towards dissolution, you can say. Everything is moving towards dissolution. It's just that we are holding on to things and not letting it dissolve. So if you think about it, you have a house, it's new, it's beautiful, but it's moving towards being destroyed. Unless you keep taking care of it, unless you fix the foundation, unless you repair it, it will eventually collapse. Similarly, all the structures, the emotional structures and the fear structures, all the different structures have been created by us, and it's being held in place by us. So all we have to do is do nothing, actually. But we just have to hold it in place, not suppress it, not try to analyze it, because that's also not, maybe it's helpful in the beginning just to understand where it came from, but analysis doesn't really get rid of it. You can know why it's appeared, but what then? It's still there. But like you said, it just keeps coming up. So how to get rid of it completely is to be with it, let it get familiar with the feeling, and know the fact that it comes and it goes. Like, it's not something that's permanent, something that I have created. And because I have created it, I can let go of it. So that's having that firm conviction. And maybe starting with something smaller may be helpful, because these sorts of fears of money and fear of not existing is very deep, right? But you can start with fears which are smaller. Maybe a fear of and maybe you may have a fear of biking on the road. I don't know if that's true, but
yeah.
Somebody does, right? Somebody has these very minuscule fears, but understanding that fear is something that is self-created, and you can get that confidence that yes, fear can be removed, and over time, I promise you, all these things are vasanas which have some amount of power, but if we don't give it more power, they will dissolve. And once that dissolution starts to happen, it's rapid. And then there will come a point where, it's kind of a small ripple, where in the beginning, it could have been a storm where oh my God, this is happening, and it just takes a long time to recover from it. But over time, the sort of impact of it reduces, and it'll, just be a thought after a while that, oh, okay, I have a visa issue right now. No big deal. Because having fear does not help solve the problem, right? You still have to do what you have to do. That doesn't change anything. It's just information that has come into your brain, and you're adding value to that information, either positive value or negative value. The fact that you may be out of status or you're going to get deported doesn't change your experience. I mean, doesn't change who you are. It may change your experience. It may, move you from, it may cause a little work that you have to do. Now you have to figure out how to get out of the country, or, all of these ideas, but they're all things that you have to do when they happen to you. And most of the fear is imagined, right? None of it is actually happening. It is just about what may happen. And we are sort of trying to protect ourselves from that experience, which has not even happened yet. And we're just imagining it. So fear is a complex emotion. My teacher has an acronym for it. He says when we deal with fear negatively, we basically say, fuck everything and run. That's what fear is. But what we want to do is we want to stay with it and, process it. And then over time, it will disappear. And once you realize the mechanism of fear, it's not about the particular content of fear. So visa issue is one fear. But once you recognize what fear is, then you can get out of fear completely. Fear is nothing but this concept of in my opinion, it's nothing but time, some sort of this time associated with fear, and thought. So these two aspects, time and thought, something is going to happen at a future time. Either, something won't exist. Either I think I may die. The root, one of the deepest cause of fear is the fear of death also. So all of those things is about something happening in the future. So once we sort of understand the sort of mechanisms of fear, we can sort of transcend fear as well. And the only way to understand fear is to look at fear. And look at fear without any perversion, without any idea of fear. Just when fear is happening, in those moments when you're fearful, do nothing. Just look at it. Don't even try to solve the problem that's occurring. Just look at fear. Because those moments where deep emotions are happening, those are the best moments to actually look, because then the ability of the mind to experience that emotion is right there. The emotion is right in front of you. So you can look at it. It is difficult because, your mind will start to throw a bunch of like things that you have to do, but that's the great moment to like practice and do some work. I don't know if that was helpful.
No, I think that makes sense to some extent. Like, yeah, I need to like think through that. Like, uh, the couple of points that you made that resonated. One is, analyzing doesn't solve for it. Like, analyzing will mentally, logically explain, okay, yeah, this is fine. If this scenario happens, but emotionally, you're not. You haven't answered that question, right? Like it keeps coming back, even though logically you might have answered that question.
Mhm.
And couple of like fear or stress, the couple of ways that that I have solved in the past is like just go through that experience. Like, you're afraid to drive a bike, then just go drive it, fall. Once you fall, you realize that okay, it's not that bad, so keep driving it. But
Right.
there's some some things that stress you out, that are so far out in the future that uh, that you can't really experience and get over it. So you need to get over it somehow, and probably just like play as I said, like staring at that fear or stress in the eye, and kind of thinking what it means.
Yes.
May help.
Yeah. And there's like millions of reasons to be stressful, right? Like there's no end. And similarly, like, exposure therapy, like, one of the, like that's coming to mind, like, oh, expose yourself to something that you're afraid of, and you can, kind of go beyond that particular fear. And it's helpful for that particular kind of fear, but it doesn't resolve fear itself. So we are talking about how do we get out of fear completely? Is there a way?
Right.
Where I don't feel any fear? And there is a way, at least it is possible. How is it possible? You have to understand what fear is. And each of you have to do it for yourself. Your fear is very different than my fear, or like your understanding of fear. You have to look at fear and see what it is, and see the behavior, like how does it come about? How does it continue to persist? And once you, and that can only happen when we pay attention. Our problem is that our minds are so fickle, where it's very difficult to stay in a particular place for some amount of time, and without memories and like ideas and concepts polluting what we are seeing. So we have to be free from thought to be able to see something. And to be free from thought is difficult because our mind is so chattery. So then the question becomes how to be free from thought. And that's the process we are trying to get to. So we are trying to quieten the mind. And once the mind quietens, our ability to see things for what they are happens.
Right.
Because once we see things for what they are, we will realize most things have been imagined. And there's nothing to really be afraid of. Because fear is, just created. We have created fear. Babies are not born fearful. Adults, they absorb fear from adults. So how do we become childlike again, essentially, with the fearlessness and being full of wonder, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So that's what we'll do. Okay, let's do one more verse. Antakarana vrittischa chittichhaye kya magata vasanaha kalpayeta swapne bodhaiksha vinabahi. Okay, so inner organ, mind, which is itself but a modification, identifying itself with a reflection of consciousness, imagines various ideas in the dream state. And the same inner organ, identifying itself with the body, imagines objects external to itself in the waking state with respect to the sense organs. Cool. So here we're talking about the inner organ, which is the mind. It's called the antarkarana, which is the inner instruments, you can say. So we have the five senses. Five senses are giving us information. And this information is being assimilated and like put in a particular frame and using our memories and impressions, and it gives us understanding of what is being perceived in the form of thoughts, emotions, sensations, right? So all of this is happening in the mind. And this is what we call a mind, which is essentially reactions and thoughts and feelings of information that is being presented through the sense organs. Now, there's two kinds of, you can say there's two kinds of bodies that we have. Actually, we have one body, but it's divided into two parts, which is the physical body and we have the mental body. The physical body is the one that experiences the physical world. The mental body is the one that experiences the mental world. So if I were to ask you, like, by what body do you experience the dream, right? In your dream, you have sense organs, you feel like you have a body, you feel like you have agency, you feel like you have ego, you feel like you can make decisions, you can have conversations. All of these are experiences in the dream. So if your eyes and ears and mouth and skin and all of those are like in the physical body, how is it that you're able to touch things and see things and smell things in your dream? So there must be inner organs in the mental world as well. So that's essentially the sense organs that are needed to project into the dream. And another interesting thing is, in the physical, so in this world, in the world that we are in right now, sometimes we have this experience where I'm so focused on a particular thing or an activity that even when the senses are giving me information, I don't recognize it. A good example is like maybe I'm reading a book. I don't know if you ever had this, like when I was a kid, I used to read books in my room, and then my mom would call me for lunch or dinner, and I would just like not even realize she has called me, right? And it's not that she has her voice was not audible, definitely audible. It's just that my mind was not paying attention. And because my mind was not paying attention, it was not an experience for me, which I could recognize. So what that means is that there is physical sense organs, but there's inner sense organs which need to be also active for that sense organs input to be able to be made sense of. So in the case of like my mom's voice was coming through my ears, hitting my eardrums and not even going into my mind. So there was this inner sense organs was not active at that point because my mind was so focused on the book, which is my eyes and maybe my brain, right? Like, I was reading this book. So this is sort of the mechanism this verse is trying to explain, that there's two kinds of sense organs. We have the external sense organs and then we have the inner sense organs. Any thoughts about this? Okay, cool. So these, this is getting into mechanics. This is interesting because it'll, our logical mind needs some sort of understanding of how things work, so that our mind starts to quieten down with those questions, like, okay, how does the mind work? Why do I have these dreams? Why do I have like thoughts? What's the difference between the two? So those are the questions which every sort of person naturally has, and these verses are essentially trying to clarify those sorts of questions. Okay, let's do the next one. Manoham kritya padanam lingam ekam jadatmakam avasthayan manveti jayate mrityate tatha. So the subtle body, which is the material cause of the mind and egoism, is one and of the nature of insentiency. It moves in the three states and is born and it dies. Okay, so the subtle body. So the word for subtle body is sukshma sharira, so we have two kinds of bodies, like I said. Essentially there's one body, but there's, the physical body, which is like made out of like the physical matter. And then there's the subtle body. We are not going into detail of what the subtle body is in this book, but essentially it's divided into different sheets, and it is the cause for the mind and the egoism. So, I am fill in the blank. That fill in the blank, I am smart, I am successful, I am unintelligent, I am, stupid. All of these like aspects that, experiences that we have is because of the subtle body. It allows us to make sense of the world and have ideas about what is being experienced. And it happens through our huge, vast impressions that we have. And those impressions cause us to have certain kinds of thoughts. And another interesting thing that this verse is saying is that the subtle body is insentient, which means that there is no sentiency in it. Just like the physical body is insentient. What is sentient? I. Nothing else is sentient. And we can prove that for the subtle body is that the reason it is sentient is because it arises, it exists for a time, and it dies. The definition of sentiency in this work is something that is permanent. Can you find something that is permanent, that does not rise, that does not fall, that is not born and cannot die? If I think of a mango, so everybody think of mango. It's like my wife's in India right now, and she's telling me that mangoes are starting to come in India. So mangoes are in my mind. And so if we all think of a mango, that thought has appeared. It did not exist, 15 seconds ago. It has appeared. I can think of a mango. I can think of the yellow color. I can think of the juice coming out when I slice the mango. When I cut it into small pieces, I can think of all of the different textures and smell of the mango. All of this I have created in my mind. It exists until I am thinking about it. And then when I start to think about what I'm going to do this afternoon, the mango is gone. So the mango is not a sentient thing. It is something that was born from the unconscious of all the memories that I have. I've used that to create a mango in my head, and it existed for a while, and then it's gone. So that is what the subtle body does. And maybe it's not worth talking about this, but subtle body is the one that essentially transmigrates, which is when it, if you believe in reincarnation, this is the one that goes from one body to another. Physical body dies, the subtle body is the one that takes a new physical body. And we sort of start the process again of human life. From the standpoint of the absolute, which is from the standpoint of the self, there is no reincarnation, because the self does not rise, does not fall, is not born, does not die. What dies? Everything that is perceived. What is born? Everything that is seen. So everything that is perceived has the nature of time and space, and anything that's limited to time has birth and has death. Okay, so that was a bit of a tangent, but essentially what this verse is driving at is the subtle body is insentient. So do not take your mind seriously. It is not conscious. Who is conscious? I am conscious. Who sees this phone? I see this phone. So I am conscious. The phone is not conscious. I am very clear that the phone is not conscious. Why? Because I am the one looking at the phone. The body similarly is not conscious. Why? Because I am the one looking at the body. The body cannot look at me. The body cannot have a thought about me, right? I am the one that can have a thought about the body. Similarly, if I go one level subtler, I can have a thought about the mind. The mind is smart. The mind is silly. Mind is stupid. These are all qualities of the mind. The identification which happens is that I think I am the mind, where I think I am smart, I am subtle, and I am stupid, I am intelligent, I am not intelligent. All of these ideas that is presented, because they happen so fast, I get attached and identified. But I'm the one looking at that thought. Does everyone see that? I can see the thought, I am stupid, or I can see the thought, I am intelligent. So I am the one looking at the thoughts that are created by the mind. So the mind is insentient. The thought, one thought cannot look at another thought. The thought that I am smart cannot see the thought that I am silly. Those are two separate thoughts that come in one after the other, and one cannot see the other. Can everyone see that? That's why the mind is insentient. I am sentient. It's because of my awareness. Or I can't even say my awareness. It's because of awareness that I can see everything. If this awareness is taken away, what is there to see? Who will see what? So that is the implication of this verse. Any thoughts about this? Okay, so let's do one more. Shakti dvayam hi mayaya vikshepa vritti rupakam vikshepak shaktir lingadi brahmanandanam jagat srijet. So two powers undoubtedly are predicated of Maya, that is, those of projecting and veiling. The projecting power creates everything from the subtle body to the gross universe. All right, so we are given this word Maya, which is, a very misunderstood word. So Maya is the word we use to describe how the impossible becomes possible. So what is the impossible? The impossible is that if consciousness is one, unchanging, does not rise, does not set, is the same everywhere, has no qualities, all these descriptions that we use for consciousness, if that is the fact, how is it that this world is so diverse? How is it that there's so many different qualities? Something is hot, something is cold, something is large, something is small, something is, green, something is blue, all these diversities. How is it possible that this happens? And we use the word Maya to say that this is the cause. It has a great power. This great power to make this happen. And what are these two? It has two powers. And the two powers are veiling power and the projecting power. It's interesting that this is saying projecting and veiling. I would frame it as veiling and projecting, which is first veiling happens. I don't know who I am. That is the first power of Maya. And then the second power is once I don't know who I am, I project onto the world, all kinds of desires that I have. So a good typical example we use in this work is the example of the rope and the snake. So let's say you're walking, after a few drinks, in the night, you're it's maybe after sunset. So it's pretty dark. You're walking on the street, and in the distance, you see something that looks like a snake. And it's dark. There's not much light, and you're kind of terrified of snakes. And you're like, oh my God, this is a snake, and then you start imagining all sorts of situations, fear comes up. So Prashant, you're talking about fear. So because of fear, now I start to think about where is the closest hospital? What if I get bit? Is there going to be antivenom there? I know somebody who got bit by a snake and died. Oh my God, if I die, I'm going to lose my job. What's going to happen with money, my family? What has happened? We have started imagining all sorts of things. Right, and they all could be true in the sense that yes, if I die, then my family may not have enough money, and there's all valid things to think about. But what is the cause of all of the projecting in this situation? Is that I think that's a snake, and the snake is going to do something to me. But let's say a car goes by and with the headlights on, and then it shines light on that, and then you finally see, oh, it's not a snake, it's a rope. And then what has happened to all of the story that I had created, of the going to the hospital, being bitten, maybe dying, not having enough money, all of those things that I had created fall apart immediately, because the knowledge of what that thing truly is has dawned on me. So this is the sort of previous verse when we spoke about how knowledge can get rid of our ignorance. So once knowledge dawns about the nature of what I am perceiving, the story drops away, because the story was completely based on a false understanding. And because of false understanding, I can have infinite descriptions of something that's incorrect, right? The mind is so beautiful, it's such a powerful instrument that it can imagine whatever it wants. That's the power of the mind. And because of this unexamination, which I have not examined what I am seeing really, I have just assumed that what the senses are reporting to be true. And that's the veiling power, which is I don't know who I am. And this is the power of Maya. First power, I don't know who I am. It hides, I think what I am seeing is who I am. So I'm seeing fear, maybe I'm seeing anger, maybe I'm seeing all sorts of different things. Maybe I'm seeing suffering. I think I am all of that. And then projecting. And because I think I am what I am seeing, I have stories about it. And I project reality. So I may try to solve a problem which does not even exist. How many of us have tried to do that? You may get a letter from sometimes that happens. I get a letter from you're talking about immigration. You get a letter from an immigration thing. Oh my God, has something happened? Am I getting deported? You open the letter, it's like, oh, your visa has been approved, right? So we imagine things even before realizing or looking at what it is, because the mind thinks what it's seeing is real. So that's the projecting power of this universe. And that's how this entire universe has been created. So that's how we explain what Maya is. It's essentially, nobody knows the cause of it. So if you have a question of what's the cause? Nobody knows. It's like saying, why is this, color of the sky blue? And why not red? I know, just that's how it is. Okay. Any thoughts about this verse? All right, I think this is a good place to stop. We have about 25 minutes left. I think the next one we're going to go into Brahman and stuff, so I would like some time to talk about it. Okay, let us do a meditation then, if no questions. All right. Let's start by sitting in a comfortable position. Make sure you're sitting upright. Your neck, head, and your back are in a straight line, feeling comfortable. Gently feel if your head is resting on your shoulders without any strain. If it is, maybe just lean forward or backward. Just feel like it's sitting comfortably and resting comfortably on your shoulders. We start this meditation by taking a few breaths. Just feeling that breath going into your lungs, expanding your lungs. Just gently scanning your body to see if you're holding on to any strain. If you are, maybe try breathing into that part of the body. On the exhale, releasing that strain. Do that a couple more times. We're going to continue our meditation process of subject-object discrimination. We want to see that this breath, just observe the quality of the breath. Is it short? Is it long? You can see that I'm the one that's looking at this breath. The breath cannot look at me. You can gently scan your body for any sensations. Feel the sensation of the chair against your back, the chair against your bottom. I'm aware of these sensations. I'm the one looking at the sensations. Notice if you're thinking about something, maybe some task you have to do, or maybe your mind is silent. I'm the one who's looking at even the thoughts or the lack of thoughts. The thoughts cannot look at me. The thoughts are insentient. I am sentient. The same I is looking at the breath. Same I is looking at the sensations. The same I is looking at the thoughts as well. You don't need a different I to look. It's the same I. It's one consciousness, one awareness that is doing the looking. Keep noticing this awareness is always on. There's no time when this awareness is off. Because you're always aware of something. Aware of your breath, your thoughts, your emotions, sensations. This awareness is always on, illumining whatever you're paying attention to. So we want to try to reverse this attention, and instead of paying attention to different perceptions like the breath, sensations, you want to try to see where is this awareness coming from? Is there a location to this awareness? Is it in your head? Is it in your eyes? Can you find a location where it starts? Can you find a location where it's not there? If you're having thoughts about where it's located, that is also being perceived and illumined by this awareness, by this I. what you may start to see is that this awareness is everywhere. There is no place in my subjective experience where it is not. It doesn't rise, it doesn't fall, it is a constant. What rises and falls are things that are in it, which are my thoughts, my awareness of the breath, sensations, all of those are experiences that I perceive. To come to this place, you didn't have to do anything. You just had to look. You didn't have to eat anything. You didn't have to do any exercises. You just rested in this place and it appeared. We want to come to this place as much as possible in our meditation. This awareness, this resting is the self. This awareness is the self. Let's end our meditation session with our ending chant. Yogarato va bhogarato va yogarato va bhogarato va sangarato va sangavihina sangarato va sangavihina yasya brahmani ramate cittam yasya brahmani ramate cittam nandeti nandeti nandatyeva nandeti nandeti nandatyeva. So the translation of this verse, I think, is the fruit of this work, which is it allows us to revel in yoga or be in a state of bhoga, which is a state of desires and materialism. If you're in company or if you're in solitude, only if we know how to revel in the self can we truly enjoy, which I think allows us to really be free and free from fear, free from like our compulsiveness, and yeah, experience the world for what it is, which is beautiful, beauty, and things that happen in life, we can face them with grace and not be perturbed by them. So I hope this is a reality for all of you. And you're spending your Saturday mornings or afternoons, wherever you are, on the self, which is a great, I would say, great luck that we have had. We're so lucky to be able to like experience this and come upon this work also. Like I think like most people don't even know that this exists. I know we spoke about like some stages of ignorance, but I'm thinking of in other, I would say, frames of this work, we talk about like stages of ignorance, and there's many stages of ignorance that causes people to not pursue this work. First is obviously, I don't know about this work, like I don't even know it exists. And then the second cause could be, I doubt that this is even possible. Like there's this doubt that this is, no way that this is true. There's no way that there is a self, there's enlightenment. We can be fearless. That's impossible. That's the second doubt. Third doubt is, maybe it is possible, but I am not capable of doing that. Like it's not it cannot be a reality for me. So there's lack of faith that I will be able to do it. Other people, yes, there are other great people in this world who have the great fortune to be able to do this work. I, on the other hand, am miserly and a worm. I cannot do this. And then, so those are the three sort of obstacles that come in. And once we go past that, and once we have our faith that it is possible, that thousands of people have gone through this path, thousands of people are going to go through this path and reach the final goal, and I am capable as well. So there's that faith that I can do it if I put in the effort and the work that is needed. You'll hear in some schools of, I wouldn't say Vedanta, but like Advaita in general, like at least the modern, if you look at the internet and read the modern understanding of Advaita and non-duality, you'll hear things like, enlightenment happens, you don't need to meditate, like, those sorts of like phrases going around. And it is true that enlightenment happens in an instant, but, we need to do the work to get to the place that enlightenment dawns on us. So all of the effort that we're putting in is to sort of be ready for enlightenment to happen. There's this my teacher likes this to say this Zen saying, which is, enlightenment happens by accident, but Zen makes you accident prone. So, we are trying to become more receptive to this enlightenment that would happen, because enlightenment happens from within. There's nothing from outside that's going on. All we're doing is we are getting our mind and our body in a certain structure or a certain geometry, in a place that the Shakti can flow through, and the grace of the divine can flow through us. So cool. I hope that happens to all of us. And so keep continuing to meditate, to, think about these ideas, look at your own direct experience in places where you're extremely happy or extremely miserable, or not happy and miserable. Just notice in all those situations, I'm the one who is looking at what is going on, to see that, have I changed in that place? Has the awareness changed even a little bit in situations that are pleasant or in situations that are unpleasant? And if you want to get beyond fear and any sort of extreme emotions, pay attention and try to understand what fear is. And that can only happen when you look at it. So look at it with full curiosity and joy as well, because I think there's this aspect of struggle that comes into play when we want to try to get rid of something, but try to look at it with a calm and serene sort of place, and that's when it will be easier to kind of look at. Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to say about this, but thank you all for coming. I'm happy to hang out here and chat with anybody if you have any thoughts or questions or anything like that.